standard of living in 1950. By 1970, Israel rose to 60% of the U.S. standard of living. This is, of course, while the U.S. was growing at the time as well. And we actually haven't been able to repeat that feat since. But this incredible growth happened while Israel was absorbing millions of destitute refugees from Europe and from the Arab world, while Israel was tripling actually its population, and while Israel was fighting 5 wars and under complete isolation and boycott and so on. And so what you see from this early period is both incredible performance and the ingredients of what was to come. In other words, what you see is an economy that has somehow learned to thrive on adversity, on isolation, on boycott, on having no resources, on no regional markets, no access to capital, and so on and so forth. And instead of that killing our economy, it seems to have become our engine. The way I put it is that we kind of have adversity for breakfast here. I mean, it's kind of what we specialize in. And you see it during downturns. And you saw it in when the 2000 bubble burst. By all rights, the Israeli tech scene should have just closed up shop, because it was only a few years old, and all the factors that went into the initial tech boom in the late 90s, most of the factors evaporated. You had Oslo, you had the world tech boom, you had the Russian immigration, and you had Yozma, the venture capital finance system was critical in starting all this. And by the year 2000 or 2001, most of those things evaporated. Oslo had fallen apart. The Russian aliyah basically stopped or winding down. The American tech boom had collapsed. And yet, instead of disappearing, the Israeli tech sector actually got more market share of venture capital in 2005 than it did in 2000. That's amazing. And the same thing going on now with the current downturn, in that Israel was not hit as hard as most developed countries and is among the first to pull out of this, to raise interest rates, to be worried about an overheated economy, to predict positive growth in the year ahead, and so on. So it's an amazing story, and it's one that I think, we have a chapter on threats in the book. Everything is not rosy. There are things that need to be done, and I have ideas about that we can talk about in the Q&A. But we also need to be aware of what we're good at. And I'm sure the question will come up about startups versus big companies, but let's get into the Q&A. Yes?
Actually, can I?
Okay.
Can you tell the Doug Foreman story very quickly, or either that or the Iskal story? Because I think that was particularly relevant. Then we'll do Q&A.
Right. Well, one important part of the story is that somehow Israel over time has been able to overcome the concern that people have about security, about the security situation here. And what's happened over time is that somehow the whole story of high tech and investments and so on has become almost completely divorced from the security situation, and that's not by chance. It's stories like that of Dov Froman, who of course founded Intel Israel, which is also another story about how the interaction between people going to the U.S. and coming back is very important. Dov Froman founded Intel Israel, and in the Gulf War, 1991, the first Gulf War, you probably remember that the government ordered, as it was clear that the Scud missiles were going to fall here, everybody was getting gas masks, we thought there might be chemical weapons, and the government gave the order that all businesses must shut down the minute the sirens were going off, even before. The schools were shut down, the business was shut down, and Dov Froman had to make a decision whether to keep Intel open. And Dov actually wrote this up as a business case. I don't know whether it was for Harvard or something else, and he wrote about it in his own book. But it's an incredible case study, because Dov was thinking not just about Intel Israel. First of all, he was thinking, if Intel Israel does not make its deliveries, if it shuts down for 1 minute, I know that the next time I go up with an Intel Israel and I try to get a fab built here, a factory, a $2 billion factory, I'm going to have a problem. But more than that, Froman says that he was thinking also of the entire high-tech world, high-tech in Israel, because at that time it was very much in its infancy. And where Intel goes, the whole high-tech scene could be affected. So what happened was, when that first siren went off at 2 in the morning, he went in with his family into the sealed room, put on his gas mask, and when the all-clear sounded, he ran to the factory. He put out the word that, we're going to stay open. You don't have to come. It's voluntary. We're not requiring you to come, but we're going to stay open. And he didn't know how many people were going to show up. He knew, he ran to the factory at 3 in the morning and everybody was still on shift. They had gotten their gas mask on, for a few minutes and they were back at work. But then the next morning, the question was, who was going to show up? And about 75% of the workforce showed up. And then the next day, about 90% showed up. And then as it went on, they were opening a little kindergarten inside Intel there because there were no schools. And this was, classic Israeli example of how you cope with adversity. And this also what happened with ISCAR is that, Warren Buffett made his first investment. Warren Buffett, of course, is pretty known for being risk averse. If anybody's going to be worried about security somewhere, Warren Buffett would be worried. He's a conservative investor. He's never made an investment outside of the United States. And he decides to buy ISCAR for $4.8 billion. And he does this right before the 2006 Second Lebanon War. And ISCAR is located in the north, where the missiles are falling. So, that deal could have broken up. But he gets a call from Eitan Wertheimer, who says, as far as you're concerned, there is no war. Because we're not going to miss a delivery. We're not going to miss anything. We're going to keep our factories open. And Buffett knows that even if Chas v'Chalila, ISCAR gets hit, that's not the company. A factory can be rebuilt. A company is know-how, it's technology, it's guts, it's being mission-oriented. I didn't even talk about how all the ways the military feeds into this story. But that's ISCAR and that's Intel.
Okay. Saul, thank you very much. Questions for Saul? Anybody? Can't name somebody. Go ahead.
You?
Go ahead. And I don't know if this is going to work, so you're going to have to try this.
David Boxenhorn, domicile. I have first a comment and then a question. I wrote about 5 or 6 years ago. I wrote a blog post on my blog about this very subject, and I think you missed at the beginning. You gave a whole bunch of statistics about amazing things about Israel. I think you missed the most amazing thing of all, which is that if you go to Boston or Silicon Valley, you'll see that people who work there in the high-tech industry are not from those places. Boston and Silicon Valley are sucking in people from all over the world. A lot of them not even from America, but a lot of them from other places in America.
Including Israel, yeah.
So, the high-tech industry in America lives on immigration. So, kudos to
Actually,
and Israel has a lot of immigration, but I bet that nobody has ever come to Israel in order to work in the high-tech industry.
Well, you bring up immigration. Immigration is a very important part of our book because we say.
My point is that.
You have a question?
Go ahead, address it. First of all,
okay.
About the immigration part.
Okay. We make a lot of points. One is that Israel is not just a nation of startups. The title of the book, Startup Nation, also refers to the fact that Israel is itself a startup. And we think that's very relevant and critical to the whole story in explaining why we're so good at startups. And part of that is that we are a country of immigrants. And it's very important to understand that there are basically, as far as we can tell, only two countries in the world that are both innovative and entrepreneurial. There are a lot of places that are very innovative, like